So thank you everyone for joining today. Quick introductions. My name's Scott Money. I'm the Director of Operations with the DocPoint team. Joining us today as well is Raymond Cabral from Nintex. Nintex is Ray is a solution architect with Nintex, and Doug is joining us as well from our local Maryland office. Doug is a senior IAM consultant with our DocPoint and QAI and IAM team. So we appreciate everyone joining today. So in this session, we're going to be changing a little bit about how we've done things from the past. Early on, we used to always do sessions around technical content. We moved more into business type challenges, so we can share what we're seeing business-wise. We get a little more feedback that way. We had some sessions with TechCon over the summer. Those were mostly technical, and thank you all for joining those. Many of you came to that event in Washington, D.C. And now we're going to continue on with a business focus. So what we're going to be talking about is focusing more, continuing down that road of what do we see business challenge-wise. And we're also adding in our partners for the next several sessions, which is we want to let Ray know we appreciate him joining this session today. So what we think that'll do is give us a little bit more insight, broader feedback on the information we hear back from our customers. So that's why we're going to do these next few sessions. We're going to invite some of our partners along. All right, so thanks, Ray, for joining. We're going to chat about one of the main things we're talking about today are PDF files and how do we get those into a usable format. So we know they can be all over the place. They may be on our desktops. They can be on network shares. You know, maybe we're talking about a paper document that you use on a regular basis that you then scan. But we're trying to come up with a scenario and share with you a way that you can basically import that PDF file to a cloud type solution, create a form out of that, and then attach a workflow. And again, we're not going to go into too much detail on that, but we do want to show an example of how that operates. So that's one of our goals today, is to show that. All right, let's get down to some house cleaning items. So we want to let everyone know that you will receive a link to the recording after the webinar. And feel free to share that link as well with some of your coworkers. We do love questions. You'll see in the Q&A, we already used the Q&A earlier to resolve our presentation problems. So that's taken care of now. But feel free to post some questions in there. We'll answer those either live, maybe might do it typed. But we will get back to you on those. If there's something we can't answer or don't have time to get to, we'll get back to you after the session. So we do have some other channels where questions come in on. Sometimes they come in via email or other chat tools that we use with our customers. So we will share those as we move through this presentation. So our agenda, we have 5 items today. Current state, we're going to talk about common practices and challenges within the businesses. Both Ray and Doug are going to share some of those with us. Transformation, what does a transformation look like? If we're going to take a form that's maybe on a network, import it through a tool and make it like an electronic version of that form to capture that content, what does that process look like? We'll talk about some enhancement tools once we get that form imported, what those do. And then we'll add a business process. So when we attach a workflow to that form, what does that look like and what does it give us? So we'll talk about the differences between not having that capability and doing something in a manual type effort. So that'll be the key presentation we're going to show here. Ray's going to help us with that. Then we'll talk about use cases, some of the use cases we've experienced, and then how do we execute a plan to get that whole transition started? What are those key items we want to address there? So those are the items we're going to tackle today. So let's go ahead and get started. We usually target 35 to 40 minutes for these sessions. With my presentation challenges, we're already probably 3 minutes behind, but we have that addressed. So let's move on. All right, so the current state of many organizations. So we've identified a couple scenarios where we see that where problems may exist. And Doug, you and Ray both see these on a daily basis. But Doug, let's start with you. let's talk about these three items and what you see and what do these mean to our
Sure,
team.
sure. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, the reason we wanted to just really talk about the current state of many organizations and the signs that a problem or a challenge may exist is because organizations are usually along some sort of continuum towards modern processes. They're not necessarily paper-based, but some signs that there's opportunity for improvement is printing required at any stage in the process, right, to support a process? Are you emailing PDFs back and forth? That may seem modern, but it's replicating a paper-based process. And even if you're e-signing, your worst case scenario is if you're printing that out to sign it, or even if you're e-signing it and then saving it and then resending it back to someone else, that can become cumbersome. And another way to just show this off, I thought I'd use a very public entity, the IRS, in case you've heard of them. Form 1040 or Form W4 is an example of a dynamic form that's used to support the citizens that's not as flexible as modern forms today.
Yeah, definitely. Those are all challenges. Ray, if I can ask you maybe chime in here a little bit. What do you see challenge-wise? So Doug's mentioned some of the things you see here. I know you see the same thing in your conversations with your customers. What are the key items you see as problems that exist with these forms?
Yeah, problems that exist. So PDF forms are essentially static. They're not living, breathing entities. So a lot of times there's sections that are on the page that are irrelevant. They need to be fulfilled. They may not need to be fulfilled. There's no dynamic nature to them. So they're going to be prone to a lot of user error, whether it's someone filling in the wrong thing, putting it in the wrong format. And usually there's a data system on the back end that it needs to feed into. So there's usually a need for validation and compliance that usually doesn't exist, especially when it's a printed PDF form. A little bit less so when it's electronic PDF because you can have some validation in there, but even still, it lacks rules and the user can see everything. So all instructions are visible. There's really no dynamic nature to that. Different use cases, a lot of citizen-facing use cases when you get into things like permits and registrations. A lot of times there's processes after that need to be daisy chained with automation and technology that doesn't exist when you use a PDF. So that's where we come in to help, not only just providing an electronic version of that form, but also helping with the automation in the after. And there's tons of other use cases for internal uses. HR is a big one, employee onboarding, paid time off, things like that. So that's my 2 cents on PDFs and what we see over here at Nintex.
Great, great. Those are great points. I'm going to add on to that. We talk about, you mentioned consistency with the forms. We get into version issues sometimes. So if someone's using a different version of a file, maybe they're using that for the manual signature process, they're not using a current version. That can be an issue as well, right? So these PDFs came from somewhere. A lot of times they came from paper. They were scanned, maybe stored on the network somewhere. Someone else scans it. All of a sudden we're passing around a signature document and there's 2 or 3 different versions out there. So not something we want to have in our workplace for sure. So I appreciate that feedback. And yeah, Doug, you were mentioning that combination of these items. So it's not just emailing a fillable form. It can be, printing something, signing it, printing it, signing it, printing it, signing it. So all types of challenges there. All right, so now for the really, really cool part, we're going to step into an example here. If I can get my item to go to the next page. So we're going to go through a couple of sessions here and talk our way through these. So the first one we're going to go through, and it says live session, we're in a live session, but it's sort of a demonstration of how this process works. So first one, we're going to go through 2 phases. We're going to import a PDF file into a tool, which is going to display that as an electronic form. We'll show you what that looks like. And we're going to do a second stage. Doug, do you want to cover that one?
Sure. The second stage is really interesting because we're using AI to take the process even further, take information that's not even been created in a form, and then add the ability to do multiple translations on the same form. So we're hoping you enjoy what Ray's going to show us next.
Perfect. And before we do that, before we switch over to Ray, we have one more item we just want to show here real quick. So it's not just a form. So once we go through that conversion process, we're going to talk about adding a workflow to that and what that looks like. So although we can import the form, we can change our field types. You'll see how Ray does that. Once we configure everything, you attach a workflow to that. And then what does that give you? And once we go through this session, we're going to come back to this slide a little bit and talk about what do we have now that we've done that. So one of the main things is accountability and traceability, right? That's what we want to have, which we don't have when we do it manually. So I'm going to go ahead here, Ray. I'm going to stop sharing, and you should be able to share from your side. So as we transition over, again, please feel free to reach out for questions here. I think once we get started showing our tools here, we're going to be able to have a couple more questions come up. So,
and Scott, it's not letting me share. It's saying host isn't allowing multiple presenter sharing for this webinar. Might be a setting you got to turn on.
Okay, just turn that on.
There we go.
All right.
Okay. Can you see my browser?
We have
We can see you've upgraded to the latest version of the Mac OS. So that's what we see right now.
You don't see my browser?
No, we see your background. We see sequoia trees.
Application windows. How about that?
Perfect.
Yes. Got it. Thanks. Yep.
Okay, so first example, and this is a design side configuration. So this isn't anything that a user would experience when actually submitting a form. This is more developer experience, how you actually create these electronic forms that emulate what you may have with the PDF. So what you're looking at right now is a product that we call Nintex Automation Cloud. And this, in particular, this window that I have up is the designer for digital forms. And as mentioned in the slide, there's two things that we can do to assist with the design side process. So if you don't want to just drag and drop every single field and create a digital version of your PDF from scratch, you could actually start with the PDF by importing it from your PC, laptop, whatever it is that you're working on. So I have an example that I'm going to use. It's actually part of a demo that I do quite frequently here at Nintex. It's this tax rebate form. So this is a PDF version of the form. You can see it's very instructional. There is some fields for input down at the bottom. And what we can do here is a couple of things. We could convert this over to digital by lassoing content. So just by simply taking my cursor and highlighting a section, you can see that it converts what we see on the PDF over to digital. So being that this paragraph here is instructional, it converts as a label, basically just text on the form. Whereas if we, highlight the fields down here at the bottom, those actually convert over as individual fields. And so behind the scenes, there's an algorithm that looks at the PDF, the properties of the PDF, and does its best to emulate what is on the PDF form over to our technology. And there is intelligence behind it. You can see, the daytime phone number is text mask, so it's entered in as a 10-digit US phone number. So there is some element of looking at the label of the field type and then taking a best guess at what it should be when you convert it over. And if anything's done incorrectly, you have the ability to go back and change. So if you wanted to change content, you can select this drop-down change to and re-highlight the field. So if there's a field that should be, like a checkbox or a multi-picker, you can choose to convert that, re-highlight the control, and you'll see when I highlight that tax account number, because I'm saying it's a yes, no, it converts it to a checkbox instead of a text field. So anything that happens incorrectly, you can always go back and remediate. There's also the ability to just convert the whole page. So if I don't want to lasso everything one by one and instead just convert the entire page, there's an option for that as well. And from here, you can actually finish within the form designer. So that was the import process. Now you can come back and actually fix, what probably needs to be corrected in the actual initial form designer. Now that's one option. Another option is you can go with AI. So coming back to this designer here, instead of starting with the PDF, we can actually go to the start with AI area. And here, we're introducing prompt engineering. So instead of having the document and converting that, you can just put in a prompt like, I want an employee onboarding form that collects personal data, work history, family data, and positional data. From there, the AI capability will go off and build, what it interprets from your prompt into our form technology. As with any type of prompt engineering, the more descriptive you can be, the more accurate the form is going to be as an outcome. So I'm pretty vague here. I'm just providing a one-sentence instructional prompt on how to create this form. But you can see here it, did its best to collect personal data, work history data, family data, and positional data. So it created that within a matter of seconds, purely by just taking in that prompt and going off of that. Over on the left, you can delete any of the content that it creates. And there's also suggestions down at the bottom. So if there's anything that's not in your prompt, it will, offer up a suggestion and allow you to add that to the composer. From there, you can then transition to the builder and correct anything or continue to modify it. Now, in the way of translations, there is multi-language support as part of this product. You have to enable it for your forms. So there is a section here where we can see that English is currently the only language. But if we go to translation settings, we can begin to add other options that would make them available on the form. Now there's an additional step where they need to be translated. So taking the English version of the form and offering up French, German, and Spanish. There's also AI for this as well that will offer up a way to auto translate these settings. So if I go to the other areas and say, okay, I need to auto translate French and Spanish and German, I just hit that auto translate button at the top. The AI will run, and then you'll see that we show both the English version of the label and then the translated version of the label. And now you'll have language support for that particular language. Now, if I come over to the preview and toggle on to French, you can see that this form now has a French version, and I can iterate through all other language and do the same thing. So I can continue on with German and Spanish and auto translate that as well, so that there is another version of that form. Now the form lives as a URL, so you don't have to log into Nintex to use it. You can actually embed these in a public-facing website for external users and still offer up, all the same capabilities, including multi-language support. So that's a little bit on design side stuff. Again, you can convert your existing PDFs, or you could use AI and do some prompt engineering.
That's fantastic, Ray. And I do see that's like in a beta stage. So that it's just a way that we wanted to showcase really what is next, what's coming to a town near you. And then Scott, if you want to pull up that one slide, I really, hopefully that got you very excited, but I'd like to show off those, what you can do with the form once it's in electronic state in terms
I think
of.
we're going to do, I got one question that came up, Ray, through email. It's asking about the type of PDF files. So do fillable PDF forms convert better than a regular flat PDF file? Does it matter?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. They certainly do. So when you have a fillable PDF, there's existing properties on the PDF. We run off of those properties. So your self-identifying fields, and sometimes they're in areas where the algorithm may not expect them. So they're more likely to pop into our designer versus just having a flattened PDF without fillable fields.
I see. Okay. So yeah, I think Doug, what we're gonna do next is go through the workflow part of this. And then go back.
That's up to you. Yeah, we can do it either way. So
Okay,
that's fine.
okay. So Ray, we want to talk about the workflow part of this. Do we want to walk through that next?
Absolutely. So I touched a little bit on design side for the forms. I have an existing process here. We call these workflows. Again, this is design side, so this is nothing that a user would ever see. But what you see here is not only the form itself, which is, the starting point of the process, what I use to intake the data, but there's also a series of events that I essentially daisy chain together that becomes the after of the form submittal. So now we go beyond just intaking the data. We can go to populating databases. So I can, take whatever goes into the form and populate whatever I have on the back end, whether it's SharePoint, whether it's Salesforce, or other applications like ServiceNow. I can do my create, read, update, and delete actions against those databases. And so we have a support system for a lot of these third-party services. Microsoft is huge. We have connectors for SQL Server, Azure SQL, Dynamics, pretty much you name any of the flagship products, we have a connection to it. And we also have the ability to store data in our own technology in what we call Nintex tables. So once that form becomes submitted, you can now do what you have to do in the after, and it's all custom built and tailored to what your existing process is. So we don't pigeonhole you into a off-the-shelf process that you would need to implement. Forms can be part of that as well. You can have an area where decisions can be made by humans. So you can pass off what we call a Nintex task and allow users to respond. You can assign that to multiple people or just one person. Now, to see an example of that, I actually kicked off one of these forms previously, and it actually sent out an activity to my personal task view. So now what I'm looking at is actually a user dashboard of activities. And forms can be used not only as an entry point for a workflow, but it can use as a middle piece, like an action that we use to send data down a certain swim lanes. Think of like approving or rejecting a form, or having even a third option if you need to. So here I have a collection of activities, everything from employee onboarding, where I can see, okay, I have this resource that we're onboarding, and here's the information for the previous employer for me to follow up and verify that I've done my background check. I could also embed files right inside of these forms. So if I wanted to approve a PDF, I can see that right within the form and provide my response on whether it's, approved or rejected. For that, property tax rebate use case, you can see here I submitted one for myself. Now I can see the data. I can see everyone that is assigned to this activity, how it behaves. I can provide my response, whether it's approve or reject. I can show that original form and see what was submitted initially by that externally facing citizen in this case, and then provide comments as well. And now once that's done, it's going to go down the approved swim lane and execute other actions, which could be e-signing that document, archiving the file, updating your databases, whatever it is that you need to do. The actions are pretty configurable. So once you drag something onto the canvas, you just add the properties over to the right. And it becomes very digestible for an analyst type resource to build these processes out. So again, if we have something like approve, reject, where these two different swim lanes, reject may send out a notification that the approval was rejected, or going down the approved swim lane, we can do something like collect an e-signature of the document. And so implementing something like Nintex sign or DocuSign as part of the process for the after of the approval. So in our case, there is a process where we send a document out for signature, and that would land in the inbox of the address that we submitted for the form. So that could be something that I execute here a little bit later on when that gets collected. I just need to verify that I put in the right address, which I did. So Right now, a document's getting created. We're setting up a task to collect the signature of the file, and then shortly we'll get a notification here to go ahead and sign. And all of this stores as an audit trail to SharePoint. So if I wanted to log in and see all the actions that took place, I can do that in a SharePoint list or library or another application that I want to connect it to behind the scenes.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, that's great. So what we know is always an effort to create the automation behind the scenes. This is more configuration rather than building something sort of from code, which is preferred most of the time for most of our customers. But it all starts with that ease of the front end. So you're not having to create a UI or a form from scratch. Using an existing PDF file is a huge time saver, especially if it's fillable. That can save you even more time. But it's very interesting to add those capabilities and what it gives you as well. And I think you answered this question, Ray, before I go back to this other slide. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Make sure I have the right one here. So when we talk about the benefits of this, one of the questions that came in is, when the form is completed, can it also be saved as a PDF file in SharePoint, for example? And I think you answered that question.
Yeah, so you can save it back to SharePoint as a item attachment or a library file, and you can even store the metadata to the library. So not only putting the file there, but also allowing the additional data wrapped around the process to correspond to that file directly inside of the library.
Great, great. And then if there's only a way to disable the ability to print it back out again, that would be even
There you
better.
go. So I think what I really like about this slide is it's just a reminder that the goal is to have a truly modern process, right? So what's the world look like at a future state? It's dynamic forms where you can go ahead and across tablets and mobile devices. As Ray had mentioned, it's responsive, where it's only asking the right questions. So for example, a permit might ask if it's an end user or a business, and then only ask the questions related to that type of customer. And then as Ray was highlighting, the workflows are automatically routed to approvals or into other systems for a more automated experience. And then because of these complex processes often include many stakeholders, there's the ability to have that centralized management with the fully integrated e-signatures.
Perfect, perfect. Yeah, and it's all about accountability, right? We talked about that before we were writing all the content for this. Creating accountability in your business processes is really one of the most important things here we're talking about. We have another question. So Ray, you were talking about being able to store this in Nintex tables in the cloud. One of the questions is, can all of this be stored in the cloud platform itself without having to attach it to another platform? So without having to send it to a SharePoint or a Salesforce or something like that. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that Nintex tables capability?
Yeah, so Nintex tables is almost similar to like a SharePoint list, with the exception of it currently does not support files, and it currently does not support references, so like lookups to other lists and tables, which is something that you get with SharePoint currently. So it doesn't exactly replicate it, but it gets pretty close. So if you have just a flat table that needs to store data without references, without files, that's something that you could use. And until those capabilities come to tables, you would still need something like SharePoint or another database.
Perfect, perfect. And I'm anticipating maybe a follow-up question. Is there any limitation on the amount of columns or anything in there? Is there a best practices recommendation not to exceed or anything along those lines?
Yeah, there is limitations. Those are more for entitlements, so you can always have those bumped up. There is a web page that we have on our help site. I don't have it on me right now, but we do publish those limits for columns and for rows. But again, those can always be expanded upon if needed.
Perfect. Thank you very much. All right. I think we have one more. Do you have thoughts on how to select the ideal processes for initial implementation so you get started on the right foot? Great question. We're going to touch on that in just a second here. I think that's one of our next slides, actually. So bear with us 1 second. So as far as this process goes, Doug, like we were talking about, we now have accountability. We have trails. We have this managed centrally, so it's not people aren't grabbing forms and things from other places. It's all managed in one area, which is what we want. So if we go to our next item, we can talk about use case examples, and then we're going to talk about how to get started. So bear with us for 1 minute here. So use cases, Doug, do you want to start off on here on the items that
Sure.
we see on
Sure.
a regular basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that the challenge is looking across the organization or your area of responsibility to see where modernization is needed most. So hopefully what you saw from Ray really got the wheels turning in terms of what might be improved within your organization. We provided 6 broad use case examples that work across industries. Some of the most popular ones, whether it's employee onboarding or compliance, project approvals, invoice management. But we also wanted to highlight on this slide that it's also improved in used in government as a way to improve the citizen experience. So we're seeing that be a big driver of what's going on. And the good news is there is a solution that will work for and align to your security requirements or your goals, whether that's online or on SaaS, or whether it's on-prem or FedRAMP. There are options. So yeah, please, we encourage you to think about where this might fit for you and where it might be the most beneficial.
Perfect. Ray, as far as use cases go, is there anything unique that you see on your side? So sometimes we're interacting with different customer bases. Is there anything use case wise that you encounter that maybe we don't have on this slide?
Yeah, I think the biggest ones would be the external facing use cases. So citizen facing for public sector, partner oriented use cases, or customer use cases for commercial customers. If you think of public sector, think of registrations, permits, tax rebate applications, things like that. On the commercial side, think of partner onboarding, customer onboarding, what else? Customer request, those external facing use cases, which can be very cost prohibitive when you're looking to allow them to take part in your processes. Just having a simple web form that allows them to submit a request and update data behind the scenes in an asynchronous fashion, that's something that is very cost effective, whereas, actually seeding those users and other applications can balloon in cost. But outside of that, I think these use cases are pretty spot on. We see a lot of employee onboarding, purchase requests, expense requests, use cases like that. But I think outside of these, external would be the biggest.
Outstanding. And we do want to make sure we emphasize when we're talking about different types of cloud platforms. We were looking at the commercial cloud. There's also a FedRAMP compliant version of this as well. So if that's the needs you have and all of your content needs to be in a FedRAMP environment, there's a tool there for that as well. So we want to make sure we mention that, especially for our federal customers. All right, so let's see. Next up, this is going to go to answer the question we had about thoughts on how to select the ideal process for getting started. So Doug, do you want to get us started here on stakeholders?
Sure. I think one of the hardest parts is really just trying to figure out how do you make the transition. So we really wanted to, if you're excited about what you saw, what would be our tentative recommended first steps, right? Are the right people engaged? Do you have specific IT requirements? Have we properly assessed the requirements in the recommended solution? Oftentimes going through this process brings to light processes that were not optimized or may need to be changed. So I'll let the other people chime in here, but it's really making sure we get the right people in place.
Yeah, completely agree with that. On the technology side, we know that we have on the tech side, we have the options here. We always want to understand what the customer has available or can use in their environment, whether they require on-prem or SaaS, and what is that preference on their side. One of the things we always want to understand there. And we talk about technology side, Ray. Sometimes that question comes up, Ray, where it's can it integrate with Active Directory? And the question is that it can handle that, correct? And we're talking
Correct.
about
There's
Nintex Cloud.
correct. There's off-the-shelf support for AD, Azure AD, and other single sign-on tools as well. There is support for SAML 2.0, which is the modern way to integrate a single sign-on tool. So if you don't have AD, you have something like Okta or another single sign-on tool you can integrate that way.
And I'll just add another interoperability thing is, what systems are you trying to work with, right? So SharePoint is often a core for many organizations, but is it SAP or is it Salesforce? Just understanding what systems will be part of that process that we're solving. That's certainly a big first step.
Yeah, definitely. And then the review and pilot. So that's kind of where our team comes in on the development side. We always want to make sure we understand what those business requirements are. We highly recommend a pilot, some kind of a proof of concept in any effort, just to make sure that what we're anticipating is going to solve your business problem from a technical side is a great fit for your team. And that leads over to our UAT, making sure we have UAT engagement as we go through all these developments and configuration. So that's one of the big things we like to focus on. And all of that leads to success. So we want to make sure that the team has confidence in all of these applications that we implement. Center of Excellence is something that Doug mentioned in our previous conversations. Having a core team to support these implementations is vital to success. Does anybody else want to add anything to this on the transition?
No, I think that the two things, first of all, the process discovery. I think once you do, the advantage of the system is hopefully you're choosing something that's scalable. Nintex certainly is. And so while it can solve the problems in your department, what's it look like for the other adjacent departments? How can you scale this to maximize its value? And there's electronic tools or solutions to help with discovering where it might be the most advantageous. But then there's also just the effort of going and the old-fashioned analysis phase of understanding where you should be prioritizing your efforts. And we did get a question that was posted about if they do want to engage to start on these first steps, whether to approach DocPoint or Nintex. So we are a Nintex long-term partner. So please engage DocPoint, and we have a slide for that. And then we'll work and most likely even ask Ray to help join when we go over a potential solution with you and what you're trying to solve.
Excellent. Thanks for grabbing that one, Doug. We do have a slide there, like we were mentioning, that's coming up here in just a second. All right. So let's see. We want to make sure that we cover, we have two more things to cover. We do want to mention we have another session coming up November 6th. This is going to be with another one of our partners, ShareGate, talking about accelerating migrations and optimizing that process. So that is on November 6th. We also have December 4th. We'll be having a session with Preservica. So we're talking about archiving, managing, and also preserving data. A little bit different spin on managing content. So we look forward to on those sessions.
And I'll just add that this next session with ShareGate, think of it not only to prepare for data migrations, but think of it as data readiness. If you're contemplating how you might leverage AI or any of that, you have to get your data ready to support that. And so please consider joining for that next session.
Perfect. Thank you, Doug. All right, so one last item here. So we have our contacts, but before we go, I do want to ask a question, Ray, to you and also Doug. I'll start with you, Doug. If you have a takeaway from this session, what's one of the most critical things we talked about? One of the most important things that we talked about today from your point of view. Sometimes we have the same response here. I have mine written down. Doug, we'll start with you.
Sure. I think it all starts with including the right people, understanding the problem, make sure the technology used is scalable and yet still easy to use. And then ultimately, does it solve the issue, right? Does it improve efficiency and the experience for both the users and the stakeholders? And that's two different things, right? So it needs to feel good to the user, but is the process better in terms of how it's being managed?
Perfect, perfect. Ray, I'll go to you next. A takeaway, one of the most important things we talked about today from your interaction with customers.
Yeah, I would just go back to the first presentation I did on some of the design side tools. A lot of times, customers are overwhelmed by the undertaking it would be to modernize and digitize paper form processes. And it doesn't have to be a 3-month effort to get a form up and live and functional with an automated process. As you can see, there's tools like the PDF converter, AI tools that are going to help a lot design side time. I mean, it's all over now. AI is revolutionizing the rapidness of how we can develop and deploy solutions. So, it's not going to be months to a year to get up and live with something, especially if you use Nintex. It's going to be relatively quick, and that's just going to deliver more value to your stakeholders, internal or external. So that would be one key takeaway from today.
Yeah, we're seeing that more and more where AI, we maybe thought it was going to help in one area, but it's really on the development side is where we're seeing that shine. That's a great comment. For me, I'm always stuck on the analysis and user adoption. That's one of the most critical items to me. Making sure we're including people, like Doug mentioned, the right people from the beginning. Make sure we're engaging the end users, getting their feedback as far as what their expectation is. They're the ones that are going to be involved in the testing, the UAT cycles. So involving them from day one, getting their feedback on what the expectation is for a solution is just so important. So that's my takeaway here for this session. And that's usually the one I use on almost all the sessions. So a quick thank you to everyone. We appreciate your time. Ray, thank you for joining us. I know you're super busy on your side. Doug, you as well. Thank you for contributing to the content and everything else. And everyone have a great day. We'll be sending out reminders for the next session, so look out for those. And like I mentioned, you'll all get a link to the recording as soon as the webinar ends. So I appreciate your time and have a great week.